Your curiosity is really unique and authentic to you.
Helping people understand the distinction between investing in what other people think about you and seeking their validation.
Taking responsibility for it and saying, all right, well, if we're going to create some change, well, let's just do it and let's get it done now. Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the podcast where ambition meets alignment. I'm so glad you're here with me today. And my guest is Alison Fragale, organizational psychologist, professor, and author of Likable Badass. Her work explores how we can use the science of power and influence to succeed without losing our authenticity. From the classroom to the stage, Alison helps women rise, and she does it all with the perfect mix of intellect, humor, and heart. Welcome to the show, Alison.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. I am pumped for this conversation. So a lot of you may not know this, but Alison and I have had the pleasure of having met a few years ago via Chief, which we're both, we were members of in Chicago. And ironically, she was there working on her book and I was starting to prep for my ideas for my book. And I just remember her and I chatting, and what stood out to me about you, Alison, was like your curiosity. You asked me some really great questions. I don't recall exactly what they were, but you were curious as to my experience there and what I was doing. And then we were talking about what we do for a living and all of that great stuff. So I feel like your curiosity is something that is like really, really unique and authentic to you. And I see it come through in all the work that you do too. Like even when you're on a podcast, I see it come through. So,
well, thank you. And you're a great example of what I always tell people, to meet more people, because you just never know that the one random "how are you doing" conversation turns into something. And you're a great example of that. Like, I just leaned over, like, who are you? What are you working on? And here we are all these years later.
Yes, no, that is so true. I know. And, we've been able to have wine together. And so, a lot happens when you have wine together. I think you're a rare breed. And I also think that I am too. And like a really interesting way, because we are so authentic that I always say, like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but that's okay, right? Like, you find your people. And you'll resonate with a lot of people, but you have to be pretty selective in who you keep close. So, all right, let's dive in. So I thought we would start with a fairly broad question so people can really get to know you. But what do you want people to understand about who you are?
Well, isn't this always interesting I think it's interesting when you ask these questions. My mind always goes to, who am I professionally? So
yes,
but that's not what you asked me, but that's the order in which I always answer.
Yeah.
So, professionally, I identify as being a behavioral scientist or an organizational psychologist and helping people understand science of human behavior and use it to their best advantage. So I've done that as a professor. I do that as an author. I do it as a speaker. Whatever it is, that's always the thing I'm trying to bring to the conversation. And in the not work category, I am a mom of 3 kids and I live in Chicago, and I love the Peloton and wine drinking with friends and all kinds of good stuff like that.
Yeah. You have to have the Peloton after the wine drinking with friends.
Yeah, it's like either order is good.
Right. Burn that off for sure. Right. And sweat it out. Well, I resonate so much with you saying that, these roles that we have, these titles that we hold often do become our identifiers, but they're not necessarily who we are, but they're things that are really important to us, and I talk a lot about our livelihood with the work that we do, whether we're in corporate or running our own business or, a professor, like whatever it is you're doing is such a big part of your being. And it doesn't have to be something that we fight against, right? It doesn't have to be something that we're like, oh, only one day when I can stop working do I get to live my life. Which brings me to a question that I'd love to ask you is that, has there ever been anything in your life, like a turning point where you have taken a look or taken stock at the way you've been living and leading and working and thought, some things maybe are misaligned or just need to change?
One that stands out is my decision to move to Chicago 10 years ago, about 11 years ago. I was fully employed as a professor at the University of North Carolina, and my husband is born and raised in the city of Chicago. We lived in North Carolina. We'd been there for 11 years. He had always had a desire to live in Chicago. but there wasn't an obvious and easy career play that was going to put us there. So we never really did anything about it. And then all of a sudden, he comes home with an offer from a Chicago-based firm to buy his company he had created in North Carolina. And that was interesting because we started to think about, like, what did we want out of life? And one of the things I said to him was, and then we had 3 kids at this point. The youngest was very young. We moved when she was 6 weeks old. So I said to him, you know, and this is something I talk about in the book, but like, if you're in a rocking chair at the end of your life, where is that rocking chair? Is that rocking chair in North Carolina? And he said, no, I don't think it is. And I said, so we live here now. So the only 2 options we have going forward is we die here or we move at some point. Like, that's just how
Right.
those are
Yeah.
the 2 categories.
That's pretty black and white. Yeah.
Right. So if you don't see yourself dying here, then you see yourself moving. And like, where do you see yourself moving and why? So it brought up this conversation for us about, we had been, I would say, like, very happy, just like we're just floating along, like nothing's wrong. And so you don't have a big feeling like you're out of alignment. But when these conversations come up, you're like, oh, that would be better. And that would fit better. But so that was helpful for us to say, we both thought that our lives were more aligned with being in Chicago. And things like how when you have kids and you realize, like, wherever they grow up is where they're going to say they're from. And I said, like, if we stay here, our kids will say that they're from North Carolina. And that doesn't feel bad. It just feels different from us because it's not our home. It's not where we're from. So anyway, so we moved, but then it also created, you know, questions about my own career, because I was going to have to do this this is pre-COVID, right? So now the idea of working remotely, people might say no, but they wouldn't think you were crazy for even suggesting it. This is 2015, right? So no one's doing that. So I have the luxury of being a tenured professor, and moving is not a fireable offense. As long as I fly back and forth, I can do what I want. But it did create for me it forced me to examine, like, what did I really value out of my career? And if certain things became harder or I wasn't as successful, would that matter to me? And so all of that started there. And fast forward, we have realized that for both of us, living here is very much more in alignment with the life that we want for ourselves, for our family, and even for our careers. Like, we both feel like, although there were transition points, we both got our careers to a better spot as a result of this move and sort of putting our family and our lifestyle first. But that didn't happen. I mean, I'll just give you the math. Like, I'm going to be 50 in 2 weeks. I was 40 when that was happening. So I wasn't a baby, but I spent a lot of time of my life, you know, just trying to survive and not really even thinking about what alignment could look like.
Right. And it's like, you know, you spent a lot of your life, and I know I spent a lot of my life this way, just kind of on autopilot, just going through the motions, because it's just kind of what you did. You didn't really stop and pause long enough to go, okay, wait a minute, like, what does alignment mean for us? And where do we want to be when we're 90? Like, you know, there's pivotal moments in life that do make you look at those things, but they don't need to be catastrophic moments. And I believe that sometimes people think it has to be some grandiose thing or some big gesture, or some big overhaul that occurs that makes you create change in your life. And sometimes it's just these little subtle things, like this simple conversation that you had with your husband, you know, and actually taking that, you know, taking responsibility for it and saying, all right, well, if we're going to create some change, well, let's just do it and let's get it done now. So do your kids love saying they're from Chicago?
They do, but they identify with Chicago very much. We've had a lot of frustration in our house over how the Cubs are performing in this current series. So they definitely love Chicago. And my kids are all actually named after famous Chicago athletes. So like, that's my husband's tie to Chicago is strong. They actually have a surprising tie to North Carolina, to UNC and to North Carolina, both the state and the institution, more than I would expect given how young they were when they moved. They were 6'3" and 0. And my oldest at 6 still has quite a tie. My middle one, a little bit. But even my 10-year-old, who again was there all of 6 weeks, like, will always tell people she was born in North Carolina. And I was like, that's technically accurate, but I mean,
oh, how funny.
No time there. Yeah. So
yeah.
So I think they identify as being from Chicago, but they've held on to North Carolina as part of their identity.
Well, I mean, why not, right? It's like
Yeah.
we're all kind of, I feel like transplants in general.
Yeah, no judgment on it. I just find it interesting when
Yeah,
you see
it
with
is
kids, like
interesting.
what they imprint on and how they identify
Yes,
themselves. And it's
right.
all fascinating to watch.
Right. Well, speaking of kids and, obviously careers and then, um, a marriage, we all know that there's a lot of pulls and demands on our time, our energy, and our attention. And so from your perspective, what are some of those things that you find just drain you and sort of like, suck the life out of you here and there?
Email.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really still at 50, I'm trying to get a handle on like letting my email not take up space in my brain without paying rent. So that I find that very draining and still have not totally mastered. I'm like super efficient with it in a lot of ways compared to most people, but still haven't got it to the point where I don't feel controlled by it.
Yeah.
Um, what else is I mean, so this is draining, but in a different kind of way. So I'm really introverted. So
Yeah.
human interaction is draining. Now,
Mhm.
it's rewarding too. So unlike email, which I'd be happy to just say, like, have someone manage this and never look at it again, I don't feel that way about
Right.
speaking to audiences or be like, interacting with human beings. But I do have to be aware of it because I do not have the capacity for endless human interaction. In fact, my
Yeah.
capacity is quite finite before I say, like, I need a massive recharge.
Right. Isn't that funny? Like, so you and I have that in common. We didn't know that, but I'm a complete introvert too. And we're both speakers, right? Like we go in front of audiences of all sizes and you would think that we're extroverts and people always do. They're like, oh, I can never speak in front of people because I'm not an extrovert. I'm like, it has nothing to do with being extroverted because I'm not. And being introverted, you have to fill yourself up. You have to set yourself up for success by being self-aware enough to say, okay, I know that if I have this engagement tomorrow, I need my night before to look like this. Like it needs to look a certain way. It needs to feel a certain way because I can't just willy-nilly it and think that I'm going to give my best performance the next day or be, mentally clear. Like, for example, I can't have 3 glasses of wine the night before I speak. There's no way. I won't do it. I already know that I'll be too foggy and I will not feel good about it. So what would you say are some of the things that are rituals and or non-negotiables that are those things that really help you keep yourself energized and aligned just from a like day-to-day perspective within yourself?
For sure.
Yeah.
Um, have done a pretty good job over the past, I'd say 5 years
Mhm.
of dialing in like the basic things that they tell, particularly middle-aged people to do for their health. Like I'm a good water drinker.
Yeah.
I am a good habitual exerciser.
Yeah.
I am good at feeding myself generally proper. Like if I
Yeah.
feed myself poorly, it's because I'm out having fun with friends, not because I haven't made time to like actually feed myself.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's because the French fries at RPM are good.
exactly. Like that I'm doing something
Yeah.
fun, not the like, oh, I'm so busy that, I basically ended up eating gummy bears for lunch today because I didn't have time to do anything.
Yeah.
So I do those things. I consider those things non-negotiable. Um, I'm, uh, I'm a pretty good almost 8 hour sleeper. I'm an early to rise person, so I'm an early to bed person. So those things have been really central to me because I do feel like if those things aren't going well, then everything else does start to feel like a little bit of a mess. And over time, I've experimented with just either doing less work or cutting more corners on work to make sure that I have time to do those things. And so far, nothing catastrophic has happened, which has
Yes.
convinced me that I have enough time to be able to
There you
drink, eat,
go.
and exercise every day.
Right. You can fit in what matters most because those things
Yeah.
matter to you because your health matters to you. Right. And, I was talking about that recently with someone that when we don't fit in those things that fuel us and that help us be a better version of ourselves, we just enter a victimhood mentality. And it's like, do you want to be a victim to life or do you want to feel like you own your life? And I don't know about
Totally.
you, but yeah, I'll take ownership any day. And yeah, it takes action to own your life. That's what planet Earth is, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I am a little bit planful. Actually, I shouldn't say a little bit. I plan these things, but as over time, as I become more experienced with planning, the planning doesn't take as much effort
Yeah.
because I kind of do the same thing. So back to the idea of, the
Yeah.
healthiest people eat the same thing every day. And I feel like it's the same kind of thing. Like once I lock in to being like, okay,
Yeah.
Like I have a water bottle, it's this big. Like I do my workout generally at this time of day, that kind of stuff. But I do spend a good amount of time like thinking about the plan.
Right. How would you say success and the way that you define your success has changed over time? I mean, obviously, I don't know if we'd really define success in our 20s, but like if you would say success in your 30s versus now, how has it changed?
Um, I feel like in some ways it hasn't, but you just like you're reaching for different things, right?
Mm.
So, most successful people, like or all successful people, they're going to be have their sights set on some goal that sits out in front of them. So over the years, like I would have said in my early 30s, like being a tenured professor would be a definition of success. But then once you do that, then it's not very interesting anymore. Like, okay, well, what's the next thing? So the things that I focused on have changed and evolved over time.
Yeah.
Um, but there's always a thing to say, okay, here's the new kind of challenge or achievement. And sometimes they're personal things. I was, when I was like, when we were building our family, like being able to grow our family to have the number of kids that we decided we wanted to have was like the thing for a while. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden that was done. So that wasn't a thing anymore. So in that sense, it stayed the same. And I think what gets harder for people and why sometimes like at the age that, that I am, it feels like there's a lot of reinvention that happens is you run out of obvious things to be collecting.
Hmm.
You run out of promotions to get or kids to have or, any other or houses to buy. And once you've done most of them, you're like, oh, now what am I supposed to do? And that feeling of being goalless often leads people to some type of, reinvention. So I find that, I need to have something in front of me, whether it's personal or professional, that is like the thing that I
Hmm.
can put above all others at a given time. So for when I was writing the book, like then it was the book and then it was promoting the book and then, and so
Right.
I'm actually in a bit of a reset right now. I've given myself till the end of the year to like come up with my next thing because
Book two.
we'll see.
Right.
We'll see. So it
Well,
changes and it doesn't for me.
right. No, I get that, that the goal line just moves, right?
Yeah.
Is really what happens. So I just got my books last week and by the way, there will be one in the mail to you this week.
Yeah.
And I think I told you this, but I quote you in here because I said, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read this little tiny passage. That moment taught me a valuable lesson. You can be successful, kind, and assertive without betraying your values or giving away your power. As my friend and author Alison Fragale says, you can be a likable badass. You can be successful, kind, and assertive without betraying your values and giving away your power. I feel like this is like this statement. When I put this in here, I just thought of you, obviously, because I was like, this is like your MO. This is like your book. This is everything you talk about. And I thought what would be fun for the listeners, today we're learning about you as a human and your life, but it'd be great for you to share what are some of the key things that you teach about mindset shifts around these outdated norms and these, kind of behaviors of how women have operated in business, let alone society, for so long.
Yeah, I do talk about mindset in my book because as psychologists, we know so much of our outcomes depend on the thoughts inside our head.
Yeah.
And those are really important. I mean, one of them that I spend some time on, mainly because people ask me a lot about it, is
Hmm.
imposter syndrome and how our limiting beliefs about ourselves hold us back. And my big, TED talk on imposter syndrome is I use the analogy of sore muscles after a workout. Like, so you work out, you wake up the next day, you feel sore. You're like, why am I so sore? Like, oh, I worked out yesterday. And although it doesn't feel that fun to be sore, you're not like panicked. You don't cry. You don't go to the emergency room. And you're like, oh, this is uncomfortable. But part of you actually then has a thought, oh, but I must have worked out hard. That was good for me because that's why I'm sore. So that's how it goes. And imposter syndrome is the exact same thing. You can't be reaching for goals. Back to this idea of success is moving the goal line of thinking about something that you want to achieve. You can't be reaching for goals without observing a gap. And the gap is I'm here and I want to be here. And that gap creates very impostery feelings. That's where it lives because you're seeing a version of yourself that you're trying to reach to. And, but and although that feeling doesn't feel good, it's not
Mm-hmm.
because you're not, it comes from having high goals, not from having low objective performance.
Right.
So that means that there is no real like success or achievement without going through that imposter feeling. Because in order to not feel like an imposter, you just have to lower the goals. So you back to where you currently are, you're not going to get anywhere doing that.
Right.
And so thinking about imposter syndrome as an inevitable byproduct of achievement rather than you're doing something wrong, I think is a reframe similar to thinking about sore muscles as an inevitable byproduct of a hard workout rather than evidence you've done something wrong. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that has been helpful to me personally as I've pushed through things to recognize that mindset is often when you can relabel it, then it takes away a lot of its power and a lot of its feeling, even
Right.
though it doesn't always still feel great. You can understand what it is and where it's coming from. So I think that is definitely one mindset that I end up talking to people about a lot, given the work that I do. And I think the other
Mm-hmm.
one is helping people understand the distinction between investing in what other people think about you and seeking their validation. So I think
Mm-hmm.
another thing that ends up making people feel like they're living out of alignment is chasing other people's opinions.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can lead people to think, okay, and there's definitely a narrative of this and books that are written with this is the message is like, don't worry about what anyone else thinks. Like just focus on you.
Right.
But okay, like I have a teenage boy. I think that's actually how he believes most days. It's not a good look. He doesn't really care what anyone else thinks. So therefore, he's like, pick up my clothes. Why would I bother? Like, put dishes in the sink. Why would I bother? Like, I don't care if you're mad at me or not. But like, well, that's limiting, right? That's not
Right.
actually what we want. You
Right.
need to care and say, if people don't like me and they don't want to help me,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be hard for me to get a lot of stuff done, right? To have good
Right.
personal relationships, to succeed at work, like try succeeding
Right.
at work where no one wants to interact with you. It's not going to
Yeah.
happen.
Good luck. Yeah.
So you do need to invest in people. You do need to be conscious of how you're showing up and how they're perceiving you, and to perhaps on the margin be able to show up with some intention that gets that person to say, thank you, I respect you, I value you for that. But that is very different than chasing and seeking somebody's approval
Yeah.
as how you define yourself, and helping people understand the nuance of that. Is another one that I help people with, because I think there's a lot of people think it's either or. You're either like completely owned by other people's opinions or you pay no attention to other people. And I'm like, no, no, no. Let's live in the middle, please. Which is
Yeah. The
other
gray
people don't
area.
own us,
Right.
but they do contribute a lot to our quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And having good relationships with people is one of the things that makes life worth living. And so some
Mm-hmm.
intentionality there of how we show up can be possible without abandoning things that are authentic to who you are.
Yeah. I love that so much. And yeah, that's like such a big message of yours. It's so profound. So on that note, what is one truth that you wish more people understood about presence or about how they show up or their intentionality?
Um, okay, I don't know if this is the only thing, but I'll start with one. And that is, so I wrote a book called Likable Badass. I was not sure what the reaction was going to be. I didn't think anything in it was controversial. At the same time, I'm a behavioral scientist and I'm basically writing a book to women, giving women tools to affect how they show up for the better, but often to solve problems that are not their fault and not their making, that are rooted, in systemic bias. So it feels a little bit, well, I worried it might feel like asking people to solve their own problem. And I have not gotten that reaction. But the most questioning I ever get, which does concern me, is always around the likable. It's not around the badass.
Hmm.
And that surprises me a bit. Like, why do we have to be likable? And and so I think, I'm a psychologist, so I'm so influenced by the data of my field. And I'd say like liking is one of the biggest bases of influence psychology's ever documented. and you feel this all the time. Have you ever gone and bought something like more than you want to buy? It's why lemonade stands work. You put
Yes.
a cute kid that you like, and you
Yes.
don't need the lemonade. We're not
Yes.
buying the lemonade. We're
No.
engaging in liking based influence, right? Like you're cute and
20
sweet.
bucks for the cup of Crystal Light. It makes sense.
100%, right?
Yes.
Like lemonade stands are running solely on liking based influence. So imagine if you could be to your audience, like as adorable and as likable as a kid selling lemonade. And people are like, I cannot wait to help you out. Like life is good. You're like raking in the 20 bucks. So I think one of the things that's been, like I've ended up having to lean more into convincing people about this dimension. And it's not just about likable. It's really about warmth and being other oriented. So it's more complex than likability in itself. But I've had to lean into to convincing people that how important that dimension is for not just for their well-being, but also for how they want to live. I mean, I say to people, I get it that you have been lectured about people have unfairly said you weren't being likable when you were being plenty likable. I get that. That's really annoying. But just because that happened, let's not forget the science, which is people do tremendous things for people they like. People really enjoy being difficult to people they don't like. And that actually you enjoy showing up that way too. Whenever you have to get snarky or mean or mad to solve a problem, you never enjoy it. You
Mm-mm.
do it, but you often will sometimes then wake up the next day and regret it. Even if you know it was the only path through, you wish you had another way. Whereas when you are spreading, right, like sincerity and generosity and care and kindness in the world, you actually feel good. It is an authentic and aligned way to live. So it's been
Yes.
surprising that I've had to have as many conversations. I understand where it comes from, but I want people to reconnect with that piece, which is that regardless of whatever nonsense some buffoon has said to you in the past,
Yeah.
do not let that shake you from the truth, which is that making other people like you and think that you're kind and considerate is extremely strategic for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is going to be much more fun than any other path you can pick.
Absolutely. And it's also magnetizing. I mean, if you run around just being a jerk and kind of spewing your negative stuff onto other people and reacting everywhere you go, what do you think your life is going to be like? What's going to come back at you? More of that
Exactly.
crap to deal with. Yeah,
Exactly. These things are, they're
yeah,
reciprocity, right? So that's what you get back. Right?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, reciprocity, karma, like, energy, whatever people want to call it, like it's real. Like there's something to it. So I'd rather be a magnet for, kindness and compassion and, more genuine behavior than not.
Same.
Makes so much sense. Well, this was a lot of fun to have a friend on the podcast. So thanks for being with me and for not being a stranger, even though I've had some pretty cool strangers on too. But so much fun to talk to you. Where can everyone find you and your book?
I would say the one-stop shop is my website. So AlisonFragale.com. If you want to buy the book or learn more about it, you can do it through all the retailers listed there. You can subscribe to my free newsletter. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and Instagram. You can see all the media I've ever done, all the podcasts I've ever done, articles I've written, all the things than you and more Alison than anyone needs in one day. So that's a very good place to get all of the stuff under one URL.
Perfect. And I will add that she's super active on LinkedIn and always has really good content. So you can also follow her there. We will include all the links, and everyone, you know what to do. Please like, share, subscribe, and send this along to people who it would benefit. Thanks for being here.